Międzynarodowe media piszą o Polsce. Obserwują to Polacy, ale nie tylko Polacy. Obserwują to również obserwatorzy na co dzień mieszkający za granicą. Matthew Tyrmand jest gościem telewizji Republika. Matthew Tyrmand, welcome to Telewizja Republika again.
Pleasure to be here. Dzień dobry.
Did you apologize when Edward Lucas on Twitter told you that if you are not going to do this, he's gonna block you?
Michał, what do you think? No, I did not. I demanded that he apologize to 40 million Poles for lying and obfuscating Polish scandal all around the world in the pages of The Economist and protecting Poland's worst political figures. I reached out to him on Twitter, just on a lark, after reading his Economist article, unbylined. It did not say by Edward Lucas. In The Economist, they're all staff writers. But Edward Lucas covers Poland for The Economist, and he is a very biased journalist. He went to college with Sikorsky and is very, very close with Sikorsky and Anne Appelbaum. And he is one of the progenitors of a dynamic that I've recognized of very sympathetic journalists in the West to PO and the Eurocentrists in Poland. And the way they cover Poland is straight propagandist.
Why they do this, and what's the mechanism?
Well, there's a movement among the sort of cultural, political, media elites of the big government philosophy that are very Eurocentric, that are very Washington, D.C. centric, and they have a very unhealthy distrust, even hatred, for things like individual sovereignty among nations, individualized protected culture, nationalists. They've made nationalists a dirty word. Nationalists were, synonymous with patriotism, and they've turned it into the pages of The Economist and the New York Times. That's a dirty word, especially as it's grown in Europe in the last few years.
Lucas, again, staff writers from The Economist. There are no names under articles in The Economist, but they say that, for example, President Duda needs to pass a German test, and he doesn't. And the problem for Andrzej Duda, in the words of The Economist, is that he may, in the future, go back to the mistakes of Kaczynski era. Why do they do this? What is the reason why they do this?
I think we can both agree that the only test Andrzej Duda, our new president, has to pass is the test of the Polish people at the ballot box. And he passed that test. He owes nothing to Germany. He owes nothing to Brussels. The ideal of international diplomacy is like free trade. It is best when both parties come away with something that benefits their constituencies. So when I saw Andrzej Duda go to the Baltics first, I was very excited by that. That sends a very good message that there is a threat eastward that needs to be paid attention to at the expense of potentially relations with Brussels, and Germany is the sort of progenitor of.
What's the agenda, and what's the reason why certain journalists of the mainstream European media cover Polish issues in a certain pro-PO way?
Well, you've seen a lot of what I write, and the thing that bothers me the most on the way the Polish government and political factions have been defined in the Western media, and PO was able to define themselves, because they have a complicit media, as the center-right party. And I often say that PO, the only thing center-right about this party, or right of center, is the side of their road their taxpayer-subsidized chauffeurs drive them on. There's nothing right of center about this party besides the nomenclature. But the media is of the same philosophical school, the academic ivory tower, big government, career diplomatic school of political engagement. So this is everywhere from the New York Times, and in the U.S., the mainstream television platforms and networks, and in Poland, obviously, we have Agora and all of the mainstream television as well here, and in Europe as well. And, I want to name some names of people I've seen who literally concertedly practice a propaganda form of journalism with otherwise reputable platforms. Edward Lucas.
Who are those people?
Well, obviously, I think, the mother hen of fraudulent journalism in Poland is one Anne Appelbaum. She has been covering in the West, in the Washington Post, and through her influence peddling in other journalistic relations, guys like Edward Lucas at The Economist, Henry Foy at the FT, she has been very assertive about making sure that the coverage of the Polish political system is pro-PO, that no scandals are ever mentioned. When I read Edward Lucas's Economist piece that got me so angry, he said that despite all the economic growth that PO brought this country, thank you very much, I certainly do not give PO credit for it. I just wrote a piece that Poland may be going into recession because of all of the thievery and corruption. They've stolen the growth. They will not cover the scandal, as he did not. He said that this was simply Europe shifting to the right and something new. They were fed up with the old faces, but you know what? Those old faces were robbing the country blind. That's what the constituents saw, but he refused to write the facts. A journalist's job is to report the news, and these are not journalists. They're propagandists, they're cultural critics, but they call themselves journalists. And when
Anne Appelbaum apple fraud on your Facebook.
I do, because she calls herself a historian and a journalist. Now, from what I understand, her historiographies, like the book on the Gulag, is highly credible. I haven't read it. I can get my sources of history elsewhere. But she calls herself a journalist. And when her agenda is to protect the people in her personal circle, including her husband, so there's financial implications as well. Hobierin Dwor is paid for by a salary paid for by a Polish taxpayer. She covers for these people.
She wrote on the Twitter that the presidential speech, inauguration speech of President Duda was kind of a speech where the more worries about Germany was present than about Russia, which is, in the words of Anne Appelbaum, a kind of naivete, as she...
I certainly disagree with that assessment, but look at her...
But there was nothing like this in the speech.
Of course not. But look at her agenda, just like Agora's agenda, just like the mainstream media in the U.S., CNN and the New York Times. There's an agenda to have impact in the political discourse. And she has been the biggest voice in Poland, from Poland in the West, blocking what we call in American football, blocking and tackling. She's out there blocking the reportage of scandal to protect her friends and her own economic incentives. And that's why it's fraud, and that's why I call her Anne Appelfraud.
What are the other names, in your opinion?
Henry Foy at the London Financial Times. He's pretty bad. Matt Kaminsky at Politico. He used to be with the Wall Street Journal. He did an interview with Tusk, and it was the most fawning piece ever. No mention of any of the reasonable conflicts that the opposition might have with such a big figure as the former prime minister and now de facto head of Europe. It was a fawning puff piece, and Kaminsky is a Pole, and he has certainly suggested through his coverage of these events and his interviews with these people that he has an agenda as well.
But so we have Poles writing for the foreign media, shaping
Western perception. When I go, so I speak frequently at Grover Norquist. He's an American tax advocate. He's a mentor of mine, and I got a lot of questions about the election and about the coverage, and I had to. These are very, very smart people in Washington, D.C., and who are very worldly and very, very on top of what's going on, especially in Europe. And I had to disavow them of many preconceptions they had about the Polish government. Oh, there's a center-right, free market-oriented party in the Polish government the last 8 years. I said,
does not exist.
It does not exist. I mean, Korvin Mikke?
Okay,
who are you discussing?
We don't have time, but
I do want to mention one more name, though. So the one that really, really frustrates me, because I'm essentially an economist and investor, and to me the most honest newspaper and news bureau left in the world is the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal's Central and Eastern European bureau chief, Marcin Sobczyk, who told me once when I submitted a condemning piece, a condemnation of the pension nationalization in 2013, he said, no, we have no interest in this, and I'm a socialist, we're not going to agree. So when he told me this, and then I started reading the way he covers PO, same thing. PO expanded the economy, yet the country shift right, it's a disaster, it's going to be bad for the economy. He apologized, he made apologism for the pension nationalization. The Wall Street Journal is unaware that they have an avowed socialist and big government, would-be apparatchiks, Brussels-centered, non-free market-oriented bureau chief covering the frontier of the post-Iron Curtain nations. This is a successful economy because of the people and the education, and he gives credit to the government. I don't think the Wall Street Journal is too happy about it, and I have been reaching out to the Wall Street Journal because I have a lot of connections there to make them aware that the progenitor of the Wall Street Journal's values in Central and Eastern Europe, in Warsaw, covering this very pivotal region, is spinning propaganda for an incumbent party of big government apparatchik socialists.
O czym mówił na antenie telewizji Republika Matthew Tyrman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.